4 years ago.
You little shit!
Julie hissed, panic spreading across her face.
You actually did it? You're such a damn nerd.
It's not being a nerd, I laughed in her face. It's called just actually doing my work every once in a while.
Nobody did this assignment.
She snapped, hitting my forehead with her palm.
It's 8th grade, John. Quit taking things so seriously. I swear to God, if you remind the teacher about turning this in, I will kill you.
I smiled devilishly and shrugged my shoulders. Well, it was due today, I grinned, enjoying watching her squirm. Maybe just tell her that Ralphie ate it. She doesn't know what kind of dog you have. She might think it's actually a worthwhile one with, teeth and stuff, rather than just a tiny walking ball of fluff. She grew incredibly flustered and her teeth gnashed, her hands tightening. Despite this, I could tell she was simply trying to keep the smile off her face as it crawled into view. She went to say something else, but as she pointed her accusatory finger at me, I cut her off, throwing my hands up. Whoa, okay. I laughed. I won't remind her. And if you want to copy it during the first part of class, it's all yours, alright? She smirked, brushing her hair aside sheepishly.
Damn right.
She laughed.
I don't need your permission anyway.
Julie, I smiled, embarrassment flashing through me. You don't have to keep up this act now that we're...
You two are gross.
Chris said as he walked past us in the hall, shaking his head.
Get a room, man.
Julie's hand tightened around mine and horror ignited across her face as it reddened. Her eyes were cast downwards and she writhed uncomfortably, her smile making her face glow. Her other hand fiddled nervously with the strings on her lavender hoodie.
Sorry.
She squirmed.
Old habits. When I'm embarrassed, I just kind of... I sort of forget how to,
Her eyes flicked up to me before melting away in embarrassment, her nervous smile growing flustered.
It's just...
She stammered.
I've never...
Yeah. I coughed uncomfortably, feeling her fingers interlaced with mine. I understand. I don't mind. It's what makes you, you. It's cute. Her eyes splintered open in ghastly panic, her body seizing up as she nearly broke my hand in her tightening grip. Sorry, I stammered quickly. That was awkward. Sorry, I'm really not good at this clearly.
No.
She breathed, her hand leaving mine as she shoved both fists into the pockets of her hoodie, staring down at her shoes.
That was really sweet.
The snow fell outside, heavy and thick, like ash from the blackened trees, scorched in the aftermath of a horrific firestorm. The void, hollow chill from outside tried to seep into the school, tendrils of frost dancing across the shuttering glass doors. The sky and earth met as one solid gray mass, indistinct and dotted with falling slag like static from a poorly broadcasted signal. The sun was all but invisible, the world in some sort of permanent twilight, a state of suspended animation. The all-consuming silence continued for some time before Julie softly went to brush her hair to the side again. As her hoodie sleeve dropped slightly, my heart staggered and the chill from outside rushed into my chest. My breath caught as my hand snapped forwards to grip her arm, pulling down her sleeve. Her eyes went wide with horror and she scrambled to tear her limb away from me.
John,
she cried.
Stop it!
Julie, I staggered, gazing at the discolored, lumpy purple bruises, rage instantly tearing my heart to pieces. It happened again? I screamed in disbelief, my hands balling into fists.
It wasn't that bad this time.
Julie shrieked, finally able to wrench her arm away from me, instantly covering herself and looking away. I'm going to fucking kill him! I cried. I'm going to tear his damn limbs off!
John!
Julie shrieked, her hands rushing forwards to grip my shaking fists.
Please, stop. You're not helping. There's nothing you can do. You have to stop this.
No, I screamed, throwing her hands from mine. This time he's gone too far. Things were supposed to be better for you once you got away from your parents for the investigation. Why does everyone want to hurt you?
It's fine.
Julie pleaded, glancing nervously around the hallway.
It's normal. Once I'm 18, I'll just go.
It's not normal, I screamed. Julie, the fact that you believe that makes me sick. She went to interject, but I wouldn't let her. Her haunted, yellowed retinas glistened with tears. Look at your damn eyes, Julie, I cried. No parents should let their child go so long without treatment, let alone for something they caused.
The degenerative retinal disease wasn't caused by them.
She fought back.
It was just kind of accelerated by the
Because
fact...
they didn't feed you, I screamed. You were locked in lightless rooms for weeks at a time. Julie, don't tell me you think that's acceptable. That's not normal. That's not even remotely close. Those people were fucking monsters.
Shut up, John!
Julie snapped, glancing down the vacant hallway nervously.
You're exaggerating things again. You don't know anything. I'm telling you, please stop this.
The doctor said it was a miracle you didn't lose your sight. I cried. You nearly died, Julie. If no one had called child services, you could have...
And I thank you for that.
Julie pleaded.
I can't ever repay you for what you did. But you can't fix everything. You can't save everyone, John.
Yes, I can, I cried. Julie, I won't rest until you're safe. When your uncle offered to watch you as they conducted the investigation, I immediately knew something was off about him. Nothing has changed for you. I'm not giving up. You matter to me more than anything in the world. Don't you dare tell me that I can't save you.
You can't.
She cried, her eyes pleading and filled with sorrow.
John, just please don't throw this all away so you can be the hero. He could hurt you, John. He could really hurt you. And if you tried anything like last time...
Her irises shook with terror, and the hallway seemed to lengthen into darkness as her words slithered out like serpentine monsters.
He might kill me before he'd give me up.
My words caught in my closing throat, my resolve fading as her face pleaded with me behind sickly dead irises. The chilling wind knocked against the glass, the howl of the frigid air distant and faint.
If he knew about us...
Julie continued, shaking slightly.
Please, you have to stop all this crazy talk. You'll only make things worse.
I took a deep breath, my fists slackening into lightly curled fingers. Julie, I breathed, folding her hands in mine slowly. I'm here. I'll always be here for you. I took another breath. I'm sorry, I continued. I promise I won't confront your uncle directly, but if you expect me to sit here and do nothing, you're mistaken. I won't let anyone I care about get hurt. She went to protest again, but she was suddenly cut off as I dropped her hands in a panic and whirled around to the figure approaching from down the hallway.
John, Julie,
The figure spoke jokingly.
I've got to go run and get some paper, but if you two aren't back in your desks by the time I get back, you're both getting detention.
Sorry, Mrs. Matthews, I grimaced, glancing at Julie before rapidly walking to class with her. The room was dim and hollow, the people inside like ghosts, stagnant and dreary.
Your mom is pretty funny.
Julie giggled as she sat in the desk next to mine, her voice curling out into the cold air. Oh, yeah, I scoffed. Just hilarious. Until you realized she was only joking to you, she would actually give me detention in a heartbeat. Julie laughed quietly, hiding her hands in her sleeves and unpacking her bag.
She's just trying her best not to give you special privileges.
She grinned.
People would hate you if they thought you had an unfair advantage.
I laughed back, but I think she may have gone a little overboard with that. I haven't gotten above a B in a damn thing in here.
Maybe that's just because you're dumb.
Julie laughed, giving an exaggerated shrug. Oh, that's real rich, I laughed. Coming from the girl who didn't even do the assignment. You always get A's and you copy my homework exactly the frickin' same. I gave an overdramatically sassy snap of my hand as I held the assignment out in front of her, wiggling it back and forth. Julie gave a smiling sneer as she snatched the paper away. She giggled, pulling out her own blank sheet.
Not sure what to tell you. Sucks to be you.
I held my smile as her gaze fixed on me, but the minute she turned away, my face slipped into troubled concern. How the hell could she pretend like everything was okay? How could she pull those jokes, force that smile? Why wasn't she mad? Her form seemed to be receding into the background of the grayscale classroom, everything within colorless and crawling with lifelessness as the snow pattered silently against the windows, slowly decaying the outside world away. The heater in our school worked just fine, but it was almost as if the anticipation of the cold kept the room still and haunted, as if we might be consumed by the frozen vastness at any minute. A brutal cough suddenly rang out beside me, and I couldn't help but smile. My hands moved sluggishly as I rummaged through my backpack, my muscles tired and weak from merely walking to class in this bitter cold. I finally found a cough drop and lifted it up slowly.
Dude.
Mark suddenly spoke from the desk right of mine, taking it graciously.
Biggest bro ever, man.
I laughed. I try my best. How long have you had that cough?
Since this morning.
He sighed.
Oh, fuck. I hate getting sick.
He lowered his voice and pulled me close before continuing.
Okay, look, dude. So I was gonna ask out Rachel today. But I ended up not doing that thing. Because, I mean, look at me. I mean, I'm a mess. And no girl's gonna want to date a contagious coughing loser with a fever.
You're right, I joked, punching him lightly on the shoulder. You're usually just a normal, healthy loser. His brow furrowed, a toothy grin breaking into view.
Oh yeah, John?
He sneered.
Getting all high and mighty, aren't we? You know, me and the guys were talking, and, we still think there's some foul play shit breaking down our barrier of trust here. I mean, you paid off that one girl, Julie. I mean, come on, we're friends. I mean, you could tell me. I mean, what, are you holding her against her will? Do you promise to return her family if she says yes?
My heart froze. Whoa, I stammered. How the hell did you know we were dating? That literally happened, like, yesterday.
Jacob had to tell me.
Mark scoffed.
Everything. And that's a little upsetting because why does Jacob know what I don't? Isn't information about your life supposed to process through me before going everywhere else? That's kind of like a rule between best friends, isn't it? And also, hands on, bros before hoes.
No, I quietly snapped. It's not that. No one is supposed to really know. We're trying to keep it, like, low profile and stuff, I guess. How many people know?
Dude.
Mark laughed loudly, putting his hands on his hips.
Who the hell doesn't know? You're trying to keep it a secret? VDA up the wazoo. Oh, that sickens me.
He gave a big smile before suddenly breaking into a coughing fit, the grin still somehow remaining on his face.
Who doesn't know?
A voice suddenly spoke softly.
About what?
It snaked into the air like dead leaves from a withered tree, carrying cold, vacant air. I turned behind me to see the pale form of a girl, her black hair largely obscuring her face. Her deathly white hands rested atop her notebook, covering whatever seemed to be drawn on the page. I went to speak before Mark suddenly cut me off, placing his hand on my shoulder and nodding at Julie, who was hastily copying down my assignment.
About these two lovebirds.
He sneered, causing my face to erupt in horror as my hands flailed to silence him.
Little John. Hey, Callie, what's your opinion on this?
He laughed, swatting away my hands and giggling.
This little dinky John over here have a shot with such a hottie.
Callie didn't say a word, but I watched her fingers slowly claw together. I must have been sicker than I thought because her form seemed to blur slightly in my vision.
Like, I mean,
Mark continued, giving me another shove.
there had to be something that this guy offered her that she couldn't say no to. And I doubt it's your manhood. So, 2 questions. What danger was she in when you saved her? And when is she going to be in that same danger again so I can have a go?
Mark, that's enough! I suddenly snapped, my hands balling in rage as I stood abruptly. You have no fucking idea! The class fell dead silent, countless faces turning to stare at me in confusion. My breath caught, and I watched Callie's body return to focus, her hands splaying out in concern. I turned to see Julie looking at me with wide eyes, confusion splashed across her face.
John,
She stammered, breaking the silence.
are you alright?
She was cut off as my mother strolled into the room and flicked on the bright overhead lights, placing the papers on her desk. I quickly sat back down and she immediately began roll call. My face burned red hot and I could still feel eyes staring at me despite my attempts to hide myself as the class settled into stillness.
Yo, bro.
Mark eventually whispered beside me, his face knitted with concern.
I was just joking. Sorry if I offended you or Julie. I mean, no disrespect. I mean, I wasn't trying to hurt any of you guys. I mean, I guess I'm a pretty shitty friend, huh?
No, I sighed, turning to look at him. I should be the one who's sorry. That wasn't your fault. I don't know what came over me. Sorry about making such a big scene. I would explain it to you, but you're awesome. I'm really sorry about that. Just don't take it personally, please.
Don't sweat it.
He let out another cough or two before giving a grin and returning to his usually cheerful self.
I shouldn't tease you so much.
He chuckled.
I mean, I had it coming too, but let me tell you, I know we have tests all this week, but if this cough doesn't subside by the week, I'm not showing up on Friday. You can count on that.
I matched his smile weakly, holding it for a second or two before turning back to my notes, taking a deep breath. My grin slowly dissolved from my pale face, being replaced by deranged placidity, my hand tightening around an invisible object as the world seemed to swim in my vision. I was only vaguely aware that my other hand had clenched so tight that my fingernails scraped flesh from my palm. The snow obscured the outside trees, the sickly flakes quavering as they dropped ever so slowly. Present day. The sounds exploded outwards and I whirled around, my chest heaving in dread. The car lay horrifically still, but layering the interior with hideous slashes and dents were singed black gashes, distinct chain prints burned into the leather. Callie? I stammered, backpedaling and putting my arm out in front of Julie. A few seconds passed in silence, but I could see the interior air violently rippling with heat. Still standing on nervous legs, I hesitantly called out, "Can you move?" The window shattered, spiderwebbing into minuscule fragments before erupting outwards, the shards sprinkling along the asphalt like brilliant jewels. When did this happen? I flinched, fear slamming my heart against my ribs. How much can you distort, Callie? Please tell me you can speak. Callie, are you in there? The door slowly creaked open. Callie's ghastly form spilled out onto the asphalt like a corpse, blood running down her face. I felt Julie stagger beside me, her breath catching. Callie's movements were all rigid and wrong as her limbs twisted on the ground to begin holding her up. She clearly had minimal movement abilities, but even the slight improvement showed that the parasite was still alive to some extent. Her broken body quavered, her pained eyes dripping with crimson, the blood vessels in her eyes having ruptured. Her chains slowly spilled out of the car like serpents released from a cage. Julie grew faint next to me, but she held her ground. Her pastel yellow eyes narrowed. I took a step towards Callie, but as I did so, Julie's hand rushed forwards and gripped my arm, holding me back. Her eyes blazed like hot coals and locked in my gaze. She shook her head. Callie's haunted eyes flashed to us, her back hunched over as she used everything she had to simply stand up, her spindly form positively crawling with distortions. Her gaze searched us with utter confusion, our form seeming to cause her pain as she winced and blinked heavily, attempting to wipe away the sticky blood coating. Her chains slowly snaked limply into the air, not necessarily menacingly, but rather as though she were curious, using them for the first time. I winced as I saw another pair of headlights rise up over the horizon, headed towards us. My heart hammered, and I knew I couldn't let a passerby see Callie in this state. Her metallic spears danced in the faint light of the approaching witnesses. I went to put my hand out to Callie, only to have Julie suddenly step out in front of me.
Callie,
She stammered.
what are you?
The air suddenly shrieked with energy, and before I could say a word, a black streak tore through the night. Blood speckled my face, and Julie let out a strangled gasp as her form was slammed to the ground, a squirming tendril of metal through her shoulder. Her lavender zip-up hoodie became soaked in heavy crimson as her eyes went wide in horror. Callie hissed venomously, her hands clawing as another chain arced into the air, ready to cleave off Julie's head. "Stop!" I shrieked in sheer panic, taking a step towards the creature. Her head snapped to me, and her form shifted awkwardly before softly hissing at me. I went to continue, but was suddenly stopped as her face flashed with a sort of recognition, and a light smile crawled across her pale skin. Then she spoke. Her voice was guttural and strained, but after a second or two, her vocal cords seemed to kick in, and a horrible sort of human speech imitation oozed forth.
Stop!
She repeated, blinking several times. I stood, utterly stunned for several seconds as my skin shifted with horror. Her head slowly tilted and strained, cocking slightly to her left side. Stumbling over words, I subconsciously put my hands up, only to see her disjointed form do the same. Callie, I stammered, vaguely aware that she was synchronizing her blinks with mine. What the hell are you doing? She began repeating the sentence. Her eyes locked so intensely upon my face that I could feel them boiling my skin. She tried to finish her words, but the air began to quaver unsteadily, and she slowly collapsed to her knees. She softly looked back up at me, her face plain and emotionless as her skin flashed horribly pale and more blood dripped from her left eye. The passing car swept by, but my fears were instantly realized as Callie's dead white face was illuminated by red, the car's brake lights coming on. Julie squirmed to my right, and I watched her teeth grit together as she hid her hands in her hoodie sleeves. She used the cloth to grip the scalding metal and quickly wrenched it from her shoulder, letting out a gasping breath before instantly rolling out of range, scrambling to her feet seconds after. Her hands clenched in rage, and her feet wobbled slightly as they held her up. Callie turned to look at her, and her eyes instantly narrowed again, her chains slithering on the ground. She was able to rise to her feet after considerable effort, but before she could take a step towards Julie, I ran out in front of her again, my hands waving frantically. Callie, I cried, fully aware of the sound of car doors opening behind me. Who am I? She looked at me for a good while, the black recesses of her eyes filled with a sort of emptiness that made my stomach churn. She didn't get the chance to answer, because in the next second a man's voice spoke up, shouting,
"Are you okay?"
Callie whirled around to face the two approaching figures, and my fears only intensified.
"What happened here?"
The man asked, a woman who I presumed to be his wife stopping beside him in a panic. Nothing, I interjected before Callie could do anything. We're fine, thank you so much for concern, but we really need to go. I looked at Julie to see her eyes narrowed and fiery. I tried to usher her and Callie back to the car, but the two strangers didn't seem to want to let us go.
"Whoa, whoa, whoa."
The man stepped in front of me, his hands splaying out.
"What the hell happened here? These two girls look injured. If you're going anywhere, it better be to a hospital."
Yes! I cried, louder than I meant to, due to seeing another car beginning to crest the hill. We're going to the hospital, that is, if you would let us. Still utterly unconvinced, the man turned to Callie and asked,
"Ma'am, is this man taking proper care of you?"
I saw his eyes crest with fear as he saw how utterly ghastly she looked up close and how unresponsive she was. She's fine, I cried, putting my hand on her shoulder, noting that it wasn't telekinetically slapped away.
"Like hell she is.
The man yelled, pushing my hand away, his anger and concern building.
She's clearly been drugged. And what the fuck is..."
His speech choked as he noticed that the metal chains scattering the ground were threaded through her back. He was quickly becoming hysterical. "Listen," I stammered, my eyes darting between him and the approaching car. This was getting out of hand way too fast. Julie, I stammered, pointing to her. "We're going to the hospital, right? There's just not enough time to explain everything, right?"
Right,
She cringed, her tone unconvinced.
but John, we can't go with Callie.
"She's just a little confused," I cried, running over to Julie in sheer panic and dragging her towards the car, reaching out for Callie's hand as well. "Now's not really the time to be We're good. Trust me." Julie's eyes flashed with panic as I dragged her closer to Callie, and her hands suddenly flailed in absolute terror, tearing herself from my grasp. I frantically glanced at the man and his wife, giving a panicked smile before I heard a familiar sound that made the world corrode into darkness. Hissing laughter. My next movements were fueled by utter terror. With a frantic dive, I slammed Julie and myself to the ground as a sort of bomb went off in the air. A streak of blackness hacked in a sweeping arc, carving out a perimeter around Callie, leaving no time for the two strangers to showcase their horror before their torsos slid from their legs and intestines spilled out like slithering eels. Scrambling to my feet and pulling Julie with me, I barely had time to get out of range before Callie spun to face us, and her cackling smile was combined with rope-like saliva oozing from her hissing mouth. Julie was now utterly stunned, not moving a muscle as I dragged her backwards in a panic. I coughed on my words, unable to overcome my terror at seeing Callie stagger towards us, humanity all but void in her pulsing eyes. A streak of metal lurched forwards and snapped back inches from my leg. I scrambled backwards further and could feel my heart attempting to break from my chest, my ears numbed by the deafening pulse of blood. "Callie!" I cried, almost as a sort of unconscious reaction. "Jesus Christ, what the hell are you doing? Callie, it's me!" What happened next made my blood turn into sluggish ice water. Callie's mouth slowly opened, and from her hideous saliva-filled maw, she hissed out a single word.
John.
The distortive air around her was beginning to flicker and fade. Several more slashes arced through the air, and I could feel the heat of the metal as it rushed past. She was trying to kill me. She could talk. The parasite wasn't in control. Callie was trying to kill me. "Stop it, Callie!" I cried, falling down, my fingers clawing at the pavement with such terror that my fingernails began to break away. "Why the hell are you trying to kill me? What is happening?"
You're in Danger.
she cried, her speech improving with every word as her eyes suddenly splintered wide with horror. Her next step sunk her to her knees, and her eyes again swam with blood as her limbs began refusing to respond. "Yeah!" I shrieked, finally scrambling to my feet and pulling Julie up. "Danger! From you!"
No!
Callie's legs buckled, and she barely had time to put her arms out before her form splintered against the cold pavement.
John, you have to.
She hissed in a panic, her eyes unfocused. Her voice quickly died away as the air quavered. My chest rose and fell as I breathed ragged breaths, and my limbs seemed to pulse as fear and adrenaline were pumped through me. Callie's limbs shook as she tried to hold herself up on all fours, and her gaze darted around, pain arcing through her body. Julie's grip slowly dropped from my shoulder, and her yellow irises trembled as she took a slight step back from me, motioning to the car. My legs still shook with terror, but she gripped my shoulders.
John,
She stammered.
we've got to go. She can't reach us with distortions. She's still weak enough to have to use the chains. Now's our only chance.
My heart stopped, my limbs further seizing up. "What?" I choked, feeling her panicked hands tighten around me. "Julie, how do you know that?"
When the class was massacred,
She started.
she just made them explode. John, she's more of a monster than you could ever realize.
I coughed, confusion flashing through my mind. I know that, Julie. How do you know that? I thought you said you didn't remember anything. Her face grew dark, but I cut her off before she could respond. I've been remembering things lately, I stammered. Things I blocked from my mind. Horrible things. If I'm starting to think back to those memories for the first time in years after seeing you, is it possible that your memory is coming back as well?
No,
She stammered, pulling me further towards the car in a panic.
John, I've always remembered. It came back after a day or so. When you visited me in the psychiatric ward, it was just easier to feign ignorance, insanity. I didn't think you'd understand. But when you showed up with Callie, when you told me everything about the parasites, I was going to tell you. There's kind of a lot going on, John. I'm more concerned with how much you've forgotten. Just how far back did you bury what happened?
Her stance faltered slightly before she grabbed my hands firmly.
John,
She cried.
you're the one not understanding the overarching picture here. Don't you remember what you did?
With her last words, her foot stumbled slightly to her left. This was all Callie needed. The grin instantly flashed back into view, slashing her face in half as a chain lurched to my right. The world seemed to decay into slow motion as Julie's eyes went wide in a panic. I barely even recalled moving, but Julie's body tumbled as I shoved her to the ground and found myself in her place. I felt the scalding steel hack across my throat before I could blink. The world erupted into stillness. The last thing I had seen burned into my vision as a horrible ringing sound resounded through my mind at a deafening volume. My heart stopped cold.